So good afternoon. We continue from where we left it last Tuesday. If you remember, we just remind ourselves, we introduced this very important topic of opportunity costs. And almost half jokingly, I always tell my student, if you forget everything else, I will have failed in my duty if this is something that you'll want to forget also. That's how important I consider it. And we defined it. If you remember, we defined the various positions and what they mean. If you remember, we defined what A means, B, C, D, E, F, G. This simply being from our knowledge of mathematics, and more specifically, what we used to call in mathematics Cartesian plane. As you will find out, mathematics is very, very much integrated in this discipline called economics. And sometimes I proceed on that assumption that because you did mathematics up to just last year, and some of you are indeed doing some mathematical units, I normally proceed on the assumption that these are things that you know ever so well. But before I continue, I engaged your class reps last Thursday, I believe, simply because the entry of some 2 extra groups who are presenting some challenges in the times that we had timetabled, with the effect that today's class has been slashed by 1 hour. So today we shall just have the class from 2 to 3. So maybe 5 minutes to 3, I'll be dismissing the class with regret. But tomorrow's class stands as it were. So tomorrow's class is still 10 to 12. Regrettably, we were not able to get a double hour that was convenient to all of us. So we've had to revert to the university sanctioned 3 hours. If you're able to get 1 hour, well and good, but normally I don't want to do 2 1 hours per week. Normally, at best, I just want to have it as either we have 2 hour blocks or maybe just 1 hour and another 2 hours. So I think that's an important announcement before we begin, just in case your class reps had not advised you. Those are the times that we should be having going forward, which will basically mean that some part of the course you will have to read on your own. Some part of the course, unfortunately, you'll just have to read on your own. I'll basically increase the reading assignment if we are to finish what is needed of us by December. We'll have to actually introduce some bit of reading assignment, but nothing too hard. By now you have the materials. For the group that joined us, please remind me in our WhatsApp platform to send you the links to the material. If I'm not able to do it, maybe the other class reps can be so kind as to send you the links to the same. But please remind me. I always say I'll remember, but I keep on forgetting too much in my desk. So today let's combine two concepts that you have so far learned and see how they work. More specifically, how do we use the production possibility frontier to appreciate this important concept of opportunity cost? If you remember, we defined opportunity cost as the next best choice or alternative that we forego or we sacrifice. And I cannot really overemphasize how important it is in economics. It is actually if you ask me, the bedrock of what we call economics. If only because this is actually what differentiates us from our sister disciplines. Most of the time, if we hear opportunity cost, you will not be very mistaken, assuming that we are actually in economics and not commerce, not finance, not accounting, or any other sister discipline. Right? If you remember, we defined also the PPF, the production possibility frontier, as what? Let me just take you back to where we defined it, a graph showing all the combinations of goods and services that can be produced from a fixed amount of technology and a fixed amount of resources. So on the screen here, you'll see an example of PPF, production possibility frontier, and whereby we are saying that the economy is making a decision, is being called upon to make a decision. The planners in the economy, the so-called economists, are being called to make a decision of what amount of capital goods and what amount of consumer goods, right? We normally use K in economics to denote capital goods. And what amount of consumer goods should an economy be concerned with the production of? Should the economy produce? Okay. More technically, where should we operate at? Right? Should we operate there, or there, or there, or there, and there? And you can see that going from left to right, of course, we are giving up the production of more quantities of capital goods in preference to more quantities of consumer goods. The opposite will be the case when moving from right to left, which basically will mean that we are giving up, or we are sacrificing, we are foregoing, in a sense, the production of consumer goods in preference for more quantities of capital goods. Wanjira, if you have a question, please just chat. Otherwise, if it's a question that is you still have, I can see the hand is raised down. If maybe you're not hearing or something, please, just I'll always give you a chance to ask a question at some point. Okay. So that is what will be bothering us here. It should be clear. Let me just remove this so that we are not distracted, right? If we are moving maybe from a point, say like F to E, for example, because of the concept we are dealing with scarce goods, goods that have that very important economic property of scarcity, a movement from F to E will mean that the economy will have decided to increase the production of consumer goods. Right? F to E. But that comes at a cost. That the same decision of moving from F to E means that in increasing the amount of consumer goods that the economy will be producing, a simultaneous decision will have been made to decrease or to sacrifice or to forego, if you like, the production of at least some amount of capital goods. If you remember, we talked about trade-offs last week. Let me just remind you, and this is the beauty of this PowerPoint and this way of presenting that we can always remind ourselves. Scarce resources lead to trade-offs. Trade-offs basically meaning that because the goods are scarce and because they are competing for the same resources and the same technology, having more of one good means having less of the other. That you can only have more of X1, say, only to the extent that you are prepared to give up at least a certain amount of X2. The converse argument also being true, that you can only have more of X2 if you are at least prepared to give up at least a certain amount of X1. This actually existing simply because of that reality of scarcity goods, or we are dealing with goods which are scarce. So the question becomes, what is the opportunity cost, right, of movement from F to E? And it will be clear that the opportunity cost of moving from F to E, and if we are defining opportunity cost as the next alternative or the next choice that you have to sacrifice, so the next best choice or alternative that you have to forego, moving from F to E, meaning that we are increasing the amount of consumer goods produced from 1,100 to 1,300, to the extent that it means that we have to reduce capital goods from 800 to 550, this becomes the opportunity cost of moving from F to E. So if we minus that, right, tukiweka minus hapo, I don't know why this thing is misbehaving. I want to rub. The opportunity cost of movement from F to E is this 250 units of capital goods that we have to forego the production of. Okay. We can do it the other way. We can have the other converse argument. One can actually ask, what indeed is the opportunity cost? I can see somebody has chatted. I hope. If you cannot hear, is everybody not able to hear? Winjusta? Let me just type that. If you can hear me, please just say yes. Because it's not a Zoom thing. I'm not muted. Can you hear me, guys? Let me just ask. No, then when you start. Yeah. Okay, let me just advise Winjusa to check. Just check your phone laptop settings, because if the other ones can hear me, then it must be a specific problem. Yeah, let's continue. That is unfortunately a personal jihad. So let her just nini and readjust accordingly. Okay, but it's good. I like such feedback so that we are able, wakati wote mwezi nisikia, this is technology. Sometimes I use fiber, and sometimes fiber has a mind of its own. It just decides to not cooperate. But I'll always get a warning on my Zoom here that maybe the internet is breaking or something. So I'll always know that there's an issue. We just have to bear with one another because this is what we have, unfortunately. Okay, where were we? The converse argument, as I said, can also be made. One can ask, what is the opportunity costs of moving from E to F? And E to F means we are increasing the production of capital goods. Okay, that is what E to F will imply. The economy will have decided to increase the amount of capital goods being produced. But that comes at a cost. Because of that concept of trade-off, cannot emphasize that enough, that we have to basically mean we have to forego or to decrease the production of consumer goods by some amount. So one can ask, what's the opportunity cost of moving from E to F? And just from our knowledge of Cartesian plane, it will mean that there is this amount, right, of consumer goods, about 200 units, I believe, that the economy will be forced to forego the production of. So that we'll say that the opportunity cost of moving from E to F are these 200 units of consumer goods that the economy will have to forego the production of. So basically using this very important graph in further illustrating this very important concept of opportunity costs. If my audio is shaky, it's just unfortunate outcome of this thing. But my place normally has good reception, so I don't know. If my audio is shaky, yeah, just continue giving me this output. I'm even trying to move my my gadget around to see whether it helps. So any questions on this? Any questions on this opportunity cost or anything that you have done so far concerning this production possibility frontier? You can raise your hand in the participant place, or you can, as it were, chat, right? So as you maybe formulate the questions, let's just see about this production possibility frontier. So far, we've been defining it as something static. Stacy Sharon has raised her hand. Maybe let's hear her question and then we can continue. Unmute Stacy, then you can ask your question. Stacy, there's an unmute button. I've given you the power to unmute. Stacy? Going, gone. I think that, yes, Stacy. I don't know why Stacy is not, Nene. Anyway, just chat, please. In the interest of time, you'll want to chat. Right? What happens when there is a shift in PPF? And a shift will denote, if we go back to the definition, you know, the definition seems to suggest some fixedness, both in terms of resources and technology. So what happens when there is an increased, the resources is no longer fixed, or the technology changes, there is some sort of innovation in the economy. What basically happened is that now the PPF will shift, so that if that is our original PPF, for example, one can talk about either a rightward shift, shifting outwards, a rightward or an outward shift, as you can see, or an inward or a leftward shift. Okay. This can basically be caused by any of these things here. When you talk about change in amount of resources or resource availability, or when there is some innovation in technology. And you can see that the examples that we have there are Kenyan example by their very nature. When you talk about us discovering minerals, when we discover Turkana oil, although 11 years later, we have not had anything beneficial there so far, but hope springs eternal, right? When we talk about a 24-hour economy, when we talk about changes in the quality and the quantity of the labor force. Right now, you can hear us talking about CBC. And there's a whole debate about the CBC education. I think what people are actually aiming at is basically ensuring that maybe 20, 25 years later, the people who will have gone through this educational system will actually be better than us, maybe. Okay, the quality of the labor skill set. Right now, you can see students actually, and even me, I think after my PhD, I'll enroll for coding classes, and I want to begin it from very, very young. Joseph Colin is asking, can you repeat the meaning of PPF? These are in the slides. You can read it in your own time, and kama kutakuwa na shida tunaweza kuelewana later, because these are things that we already did last time. Right? So these things, anyway, we are talking about if there is a change in these things, labor, capital, quantity, and quality of the same, there's always be that positive shift, rightward shift. The good one, of course, will be the right one, because what is happening with the right one, you can see that this one is bigger, meaning that actually the economy is growing. When you talk about in chapter 7, we shall be talking about gross domestic product and such like other concepts, indicator of economic growth within the economy. This is actually what this will imply, this rightward shift. This is what that will imply at the end of the day. I saw Winjusta writing, and I was forgiving her because she had already reported that she's not able to hear us. But we shall see. Okay. So technological changes also. When you talk about smartphones, and you people, sometimes I envy you, because you people, you grew up purely when these things were, you could take them for granted. But some of us, I think, In 2000, I was about 23 years. So you can imagine that I lived and became an adult at a time when we didn't have mobile telephony. So I'm unable to appreciate the before and after, perhaps better than you people. And to me, sometimes this arguably is a miracle in more ways than one, right? Even right now, this thing we are doing cannot have been possible without any. Sir, you are changing your screen very fast. I am not giving notes, Mariam Thomas. I am lecturing. And if I'm lecturing, I'm meant to change my screen very fast. What do you mean by very fast? Very fast will mean that I am like going, maybe just giving you 5 seconds per screen, and yet I'm picking the important screen, and in that important screen at the time that I'm lecturing, I am actually giving you time. So don't aim at writing notes. You have these things. Or if you don't have them, ask your class reps to give you the links to my Google Drive, whereby you can get these slides. You'll get the what? You'll get the notes that I've developed for the last 13 years. You'll get also the course outline and all those things. So don't worry about me going very fast. I'm just choosing the important slide at that particular point. And you can see here, I have stayed here for quite a while, Marian. So don't worry about changing very fast. We are not writing. You write notes as you can understand during the lecture. Otherwise, going very fast or very slow, unfortunately or fortunately, is my prerogative. But I get your point. But when you see me doing that, I'm just going to the important slide page, which I think just by way of reminding you people and all that. So don't aim at copying, not during the class. That's why it's called a lecture. Okay. So what will cause this leftward shift? Any crisis, anything that will reduce the economic activities in the economy. If you think about war, what is happening in Ukraine right now? What happened in Kenya in 2008, post-election violence? What happened in Florida last week, hurricane, natural calamities? To the extent that they have that effect of reducing economic activities, they'll be reducing economic growth. And that reduction of economic growth will be shown as a leftward shift of the PPF. So that will be basically maybe the opposite of what you are seeing here, that the resource will not be increasing, and technology maybe will actually be decreasing, because maybe hata inafanya infrastructure ambayo tayari zimewekwa zinapotea at the end of the day. Any questions so far? Right, so wars, natural calamities, artificial calamities, arguably even maybe the crisis that we are even having right now as a nation, maybe what we call inflation, what we'll be studying in chapter 6. What you are talking about, pesa inakuwa kidogo, maybe you've been chased out of work. When that happens all over the economy, it can actually result into this, what we'll be calling maybe recession at some point. Okay. So let's discuss then the last bit of our introductory chapter. I can see there's a question there. Yeah, some of you, I think I've just answered you to a certain extent. Some of you is asking, can inflation cause the leftward shift of PPF? It depends on what kind of inflation it is. And if some you can allow me, I can just preview chapter 6 and tell you there's a kind of inflation that we call unanticipated inflation. And what we call unanticipated inflation is a bad type of inflation. Otherwise, inflation, when it is anticipated, when it is planned for, is just the equivalent of a car's engine. Najua kazi engine, hizi engines za ICE, internal combustion engine, because nowadays we have different types of engine. We have electric vehicles. What happens nowadays is that there are some things that you have to incur ukiwa na gari. The engine will have to deteriorate, and you'll have to actually mitigate that deterioration by maybe putting oils and all that. But in the process of running, it has to create heat, it has to create friction. Okay, na kwa sababu unaweka oil, hiyo engine haiharibiki. So that is a good type of inflation that happens even in the society or in the economy, that if it is anticipated and if it is planned for, it's not bad. But unaona kama mwaka huu, what has happened is that actually nobody anticipated 1 year ago that Russia will invade Ukraine, or that gas pipeline going from Russia to Europe will be bombed, as happened last week. So lazima sisi ambao hatuna mafuta tupitie haya shida as a result of that, right? But we'll learn about this in chapter 6, so just hold your horses. But I just wanted to emphasize that wakati inflation inatupata vile imetupata mwaka huu, that's the bad type, because it was not planned for. So unaona bank pia inakuja inakuambia, oh, we gave you some loan, but we are thinking of increasing the payment, the amount you'll be paying per month or something like that, right? So it's not a good thing in the economy, because it makes people shy away from taking loans, for example. Elements of economic activity. Economics exists so that economic activities are enhanced and are carried out in a most efficient manner. And the arena in which economic activities occur, right? When you talk about economic activities, is if you think about it in a very broad sense, is simply the buying and selling of goods. Okay. The exchange of goods. Where does this happen? It happens within the context that we call a market. If I were teaching this 20, 30 years ago, a market meant a geographical space. Okay, naenda market. It meant that if you had to meet, the buyers and the seller had to meet physically. Nowadays, happily, no need. The laptop I'm using, I bought it last year, and just by making a few phone calls here and there. And within 24 hours, I had my laptop. Right? The phone that I'm using, I think I have also bought for somebody a laptop. Even this pen that I'm using to write on the laptop. These are things that nowadays you just call somebody and you said, I saw this thing in your platform, right? How much is it? Can you reduce for me the amount? I also bought a printer, I think, using the same. So nowadays, the concept of the market has actually expanded to include even non-geographical space, because you don't need to meet. So the right way that we define markets nowadays is actually, as you can see on the screen, and it's shown or arena where goods or services are exchanged, right? We normally use what we call a circular flow of income diagram to illustrate the interaction between buyers and sellers or economic actors, right? And we have the simplest, we move from the simplest, what we shall be calling the 2-sector, 3-sector, 4-sector, up to the most complex, the five, not the fifth, but the five sector circular flow of income diagram. But you'll see that the concept will just be similar throughout, in the sense that they'll just be showing who buys what to whom, or who interacts with whom, and who supplies whom, what to whom within the circular flow of income diagram. At the very, very simplest, the two sector, we just deal with the two kind of markets. We deal with the goods market, or product market, or output market. And this is basically the arena where goods are exchanged. Okay, you go to the shop, give some money, have your bread, right? Or have a certain good. And the second kind of a market is where factors of production, if you remember, we defined this last week. When you talk about land, right, labor, and capital. The arena where they are exchanged for their respective rewards, where land, we talk about the reward being rent. Labor, we talk about the reward being wages, and capital talked about the reward being interest. Okay. So if you look at the two sector circular flow, and maybe before we even look at it, we can see, we can also define some keywords here. What are injections? What are leakages? If you think about it, even from it, the non-definition in English, when you're injected, you gain weight. When you leak, you lose weight. I won't want to define what I mean by leakage or leaking. So if you think about this in the context of circular flow of income, anything that serves to increase economic activities will be deemed to be an injection. And anything that will serve to decrease the same, let me just write it in short, will actually be deemed to be a leakage. So when you talk about borrowing, when you talk about accumulated wealth, when you talk about even income that we earn on a per monthly basis, to the extent that maybe you get that borrow and maybe you put up a house, right? In the context of your accumulated wealth, allowing you having more choices in the market in terms of purchasing, right? We'll talk about that basically being considered as an injection into the circular flow of income, right? When you talk about leakages, when you talk about savings, for example, and na hii savings ukiangalia sana, when I think about it, I am more persuaded that see ile saving here, taking it to the bank, because when you take your money to the bank, it enters the circular flow immediately. Lakini you can think about this saving ile ya mattress, ile ya kuchukua pesa na kupeleka kwa nyumba. Because that money is not circulating, one will actually imagine that there is a leakage because it has been removed from flowing in the circular flow. So it's a leakage in that sense, right? When we talk about leakages and versus injection, when you talk about leakages, injections being more than leakages, like in the case below here, we talk about a period of prosperity and saving. And that should actually be logical, because we talk about now increase, economic activities increasing rather than decreasing. The net result of this being an increase in economic activities. And if economic activities is increasing, and you normally hear, and sometimes I'm very much encouraged when I hear even the so-called Mama Mboga or Wanjiko talking. Nakuambia siku hizi pesa iko. What they actually mean is actually there is a lot of circulation of money. And whenever there is circulation of money, we are all happy. Okay? And in that case whereby leakages are more than injection. The opposite is a decrease in economic activities, and maybe that is where we are at as a country right now, whereby we are now talking about us being in a period whereby kuna shida mahali. Okay, and I'm imagining that even the question that were being asked even by some a few minutes ago are actually informed in a way by these realities whereby hata yeye anajua pengine kuna shida mahali, right? I'm at a point whereby people are asking money from me, and nowadays I'm just tell them, I don't have sijalipwa. Whereas before I could just go to my circle and say, hata kama sijalipwa, give me this amount of money. It is needed somewhere. You can actually recover it from my salary. Nowadays it's not as automatic as it used to be even a few years back, and that's the reality that we have. So I don't know how much time we have. We have about 10 minutes. Maybe we can just maybe do about a few of them, if not all of them. And then we can call it a day. So let's begin with the simplest. The two-sector circular flow of income. And why two-sector? Two-sector denotes the actors, the agents, the economic actors present. And these red boxes detail who those actors are. At the very, very simple level, we talk about the two actors being households and farms. If you remember how we defined economic agents last week's, who they are. So we talk about households and farms interacting in these two kinds of markets to either demand or supply some items. Let me just call them items, but we can talk about them specifically either as goods or services or as factors. So who supplies what to whom becomes a very, very important fact. And we'll talk about households being the suppliers of factors. Sorry. And farms being the suppliers of goods and services. Let me just remove the inking. Okay, so households supply factors to farms, of course, for some consideration, what we normally just generally refer to as payment. Households will supply land for some payment that we call rent. They'll supply labor. That's what I'm doing right now, hoping that Mr. Kibwage will pay me something that I'll call wages. Right? If I have a tractor, if I have a machinery, I can lend it to a farm, and the farm will be paying me something that we shall be calling interest. If we go to the market on top, what we call the product or output or goods market, we are talking about farms being the suppliers of the same. When you go to the tuck shop, when you go to the market, when you go to those online spaces, you will be interacting and you shall be getting your goods or service for some consideration or some payment that you'll have to do. Now, observe the outer arrows. And please notice the completeness in them. In that sense of money flowing from households to farms for payment of goods and services, but also farms paying for these factors that they demand from farms, from households, either through rent payment, wage payment, interest payment. And please appreciate the completeness in that circular flow. I'm sorry, when I was drawing this many years ago, this diagram, I must have drawn it in 2011, I believe. That concept of circularity was not very open to me, and that's why I drew them more or less in straight lines. But anyway, the concept hopefully is clear to all who might be curious. The most important thing is just to appreciate that completeness in the circle. The arrows are facing the same direction, basically illustrating that circularity in the payment of factors from farms to households and goods and services from household to farms. This is very simple diagram. You can see that other economic agents have been totally ignored. Where is the government? Where are financial markets? Where is the international sector? So as clear as it is, as simple as it is, and this is basically what the gods whom we pray for sometimes in economics, because we abstract too much sometimes, or we simplify. The cure is actually to make it a little bit complex, and that's what I just want to do in the next few moments by introducing another player, right? And you can see here, I have endeavored to introduce him. You'll see that we still have the two suspects, the two markets, but now I'm introducing a third actor, hence the three-sector circular flow of income. And what's the purpose of the government? As I shared with you last week, I think apart from about two economies that I know, Monaco and maybe Luxembourg in Europe, in most economies, the most important actor is the government. Na ndio maana hapa Kenya tunakuwa tunaishi tukisema tunaomba serikali. Right? You must pay taxes. One American said that there are only two certainties in the world. You shall die, you shall pay taxes. Those are the only two certainties. The other things we can negotiate about. So whom do we pay taxes with? 5 and above. It is this actor that we call the government. But at the same time, the government will be actually demanding something from farms. And as we saw in the second two sector, the farms are the suppliers of goods and services. So the government will actually be demanding the same from the farms. The government also equally will be demanding for factors from households. If you remember, we talked about land, talked about labor, we talked about capital. They'll be demanding the same from household. So see also the completeness. The thick arrows are what we discussed in the two sectors. So I will not rehash that. The thick arrows, the thick outer arrows are what I've just discussed earlier. But now also appreciate the completeness between how money flows from the government to farms. When you hear about tender, na umesikia kuwa hiyo vile serikali ya Uhuru iliumiza watu in terms of not really paying people on time and forcing a lot of farms, small farms, to close, unfortunately. But actually, I want you to appreciate the completeness. Farms also pay taxes to the government, right? Government pays households for their factors, but also households pay taxes to the government for the same. Okay. Let us complicate our life a bit, kidogo, and we go now to the four sector circular flow of income. Whom are we introducing? The same two sector covered by the thick outer arrows. You can see we have households, government, and farms that we have just explained in the three sector circular flow. But now here we are introducing the fourth player, financial institution. And the financial institutions in most economies are the mobilizers of resources within those communities, within those economic spaces. So when we talk about households needing loans, they'll go to a bank, they'll go to a SACCO, they'll go even to a chama when you talk about even table banking. Okay. So they'll take money, savings from households and loan them to the farms or loan them to the government. But at the same time, they'll be requiring goods and services from financial services. But once they have given the farm loans, the farms will be paying them in form of interest. Sometimes they'll have invested in these same farms, so they'll be expecting what we call dividends. Dividends is what you expect out of investing some shares in a given farm. Okay. Financial institutions will be loaning money from the government, and this one you normally hear every Friday if you open the paper. And if you see a CBK, Central Bank of Kenya advertisement, most probably the government will be selling treasury bills to financial institutions or bonds. If you hear the famous Euro bond, the same thing, but in an international context. Okay. So they are the main mobilizers of resources in the economy. But having said that, they'll also be demanding for factors, because people who work in these financial institutions come from households, labor. Sometimes they have to hire some or rent some office space provided by households. Sometimes they also have to hire maybe even the capital from these households. Maybe if you think about capital in its accounting sense as money, one will imagine that they'll be mobilizing the same from households. Okay, so maybe I'll explain this if there is need for me to do it more tomorrow, but that's basically the overview of what we call the four sector circular flow of income. The last one is the fifth sector circular flow of income, whereby you can see we still have the four players, households and farms. We have the financial markets here, we have the government, but now these outer arrows here, now introducing the role of the international sector, the imports and exports. Okay. So maybe you can reckon with this. Maybe this is basically where I want to begin teaching or arguing it tomorrow. I can see time has gone. Those who joined us late, I had said that because of the classes that joined us, this one will no longer be a 2-hour, but a 1-hour class for reasons of, I think 2 or 3 classes that we'll be having a class from 3 to 4. We are no longer able to do that. But the tomorrow's class 10 to 12, I shall pick up from this 5 circular flow. And then we can now introduce our first theory, the theory of demand tomorrow. So you'll allow me not to take questions because I cannot see any questions. If you have a question, please hold on and maybe let's discuss it tomorrow when we are all fresh. Have a good day.